I don't like using Microsoft Word. Scrivener has been suggested multiple times, so I'm going to watch a load of tutorials and see if it's any good. 2 days and a lot of testing later, I asked everyone on the channel whether they wanted to see a comparison video, an overview video, or a full tutorial, and comparison came out on top. So I'm going to do a comparison between Scrivener, Microsoft Word, and Obsidian. Obsidian is the tool I'm currently using. Word is a tool that I use whenever I'm doing essays or academic writing because it's just the one I've been told to use, and Scrivener is the one I have been diligently going through like every small feature over the last couple of days. All three applications are word processing applications. Word and Scrivener both have more flexibility with fonts you can use, font size, font color, alignment, and all of that sort of stuff around formatting the words on the page. Obsidian doesn't have that much flexibility. But even though Obsidian doesn't have that much flexibility with what you can do with the actual words on the page, what you can do with the application itself, so all of the different panes, the sidebars and things, it's much more flexible in that sense. So in Obsidian you can move the different panels around, move different pages around, and have multiple pages up at once, which Scrivener and Word don't have as much flexibility in. Word does give you split screens, and Scrivener does give you split screens. Scrivener giving you 4. Word you could work around to get to 4, which is still perfectly doable, but Obsidian's still just better. The search feature in all three applications are extremely similar. It's just the location of where they are. They all search for words in a page, and in Scrivener and Obsidian's cases, because there are multiple pages, unlike Word, you can search for page titles or section titles as well as the words inside of those pages. What I would add onto there though is Obsidian gives you regex functions in search, which some of you may know about, some of you may not, but you can do that in Obsidian. Fonts and symbols. Word has a bigger range than Scrivener, but you can import fonts and certain symbols into Scrivener as well. So I would say Word's probably the best, then Scrivener, then Obsidian for fonts and symbols. Tracking, progress, and stats. Scrivener is much better at this. You get progress for each page, so each potential section, each draft, each manuscript, everything like that. So stats, I think, are way better in Scrivener when compared to Word. Now, in Obsidian, you can have various plugins that track stats, track numbers, character counts, word counts, but they are external plugins that can give you what you want, don't necessarily give you what you want in some aspects, and you need to have a certain pane up for it to work. So there are some ways to work around it with community plugins in Obsidian, but Scrivener still is better. So I would say Scrivener is best for stats and progress management, then Obsidian using community plugins that you want to use, then Word. Labels, tags, and keywords. I thought Obsidian was going to be the best for this because they have tags and backlinks and all of that sort of stuff, but actually Scrivener is better, in my opinion, than Obsidian for labeling and tagging certain sections of long-form writing specifically, because you can label and tag any section. Talking from an Obsidian perspective, any section in Scrivener is like a page in Obsidian, so every section can have a to-do, a draft, or whatever label you want to add to it, plus a color, and this is something that I'm going to add here. Obsidian, with their sidebar, their navigation, the tags, there's no colors or aesthetics to it other than an emoji or an icon that you put with it, whereas all of the labeling and tags you do in Scrivener actually can be applied in any of the views, which I'll cover in a second, and all of the navigation, so you can see the tag or the type of tag that's on it inside the view. In Obsidian, you'd need to use the local graph view for that sort of categorization of tagging, but then you need to have the local graph view open to be able to see it instead of the navigation. So it's a comparison between the two. Word, just no. You can tag a Word document, but then you need to go through different documents and just no. Tables inside the document, Word's just wins like hand down. You can add columns underneath the column, you can go backwards and forwards, making the size much different, and you can actually see it when you start using it, whereas in Obsidian you have to use the markdown. That's the way it is. Yes, there are advanced tables, yes there are plugins, but you still have to go between the preview and edit mode, which is just irritating. Scrivener does have a table, which is why I would say Scrivener's tables are better than Obsidian's, because you can see it straight away, edit it, and you can actually edit the colors of the Scrivener tables. There's more editing features in Scrivener compared to Obsidian, but Word's still just way better for tables. In-page lists, again, Word kind of just takes the cake. You have more flexibility with what you can use, numbers, ticks, icons, the rest of it. Then Scrivener, because Scrivener, again, has quite a few options, not as many as Word, but still quite a few options. And then Obsidian, right at the bottom, because it's just got bullet points or numbers, and you can sort of like fumble your way through them sometimes because of the way that it works, but it's still there, it's still a list. It's just Word is better when it comes to options available, but they all function exactly the same. Scrivener just wins with views because unlike Word and Obsidian, it's not just this blank page. You can see what they call a corkboard view, which basically gives you a synopsis and a title of whatever chapter, section, page that you're using, and you can see everything that's going on at a higher level view. So for planning, if you're familiar with Notion as an application, it's very similar to a gallery view, and you can just see everything overview. And because of the tags and the labels, you can actually color code that corkboard view to see what's going on. And then you can also add in everything that you'd need to see for a high level view of whatever the project is, which is quite nice. You can also then categorize that in what I would say a similar, like a timeline kind of view in the corkboard. So you'd have like a timeline card, but you can see and categorize all of the different sections of the project that you're working on, which Word just doesn't have. What I will say though is Word has an outline view, which is very useful because you can essentially see all of the different sections that you would use, similar to the navigation pane, but you can go between them and up and down and see everything as an overview, which is what you can see in Scrivener's main page. So to explain Scrivener a little bit, for those that are unfamiliar with it, when you go into a section, it's like looking at a page, but when you look at an overarching section, so maybe a folder or the top level folder, you can see the entire document, the entire script, the entire page with page breaks, lines in between, so you can still see the whole document even though you split it up. Obsidian, you can do something similar with certain plugins, but when you go into the page, you only see the page. To see the whole document, you'd either need to go in an outline type of view, or the page would need to be in the original page rather than a separate page, which can be a little bit like workaround hacky a little bit. So what I would say in views is Scrivener just has better views. Then I would go with Obsidian because even though you can have the outline view in Word, it's the exact same as just a normal page in Obsidian, and Obsidian does give you all of those different customizations with how many pages and panels and stuff you have up, plus you have the graph view, which can be very useful, and the local graph view, which Word just doesn't have any of that. Backlinks specifically, not external links. So backlinks, I would go Obsidian has to be first because that's essentially what the tool is about. That's what Obsidian is all about. It's about backlinking all the different pages together using the graph view, local graph view, and linking different ideas together. So Obsidian is certainly at the top. Now, when it comes to backlinks, Word can't really have backlinks because you're linking different Word documents together. Yes, you could do it, but it becomes very cumbersome, so I don't rate that very much at all. And then Scrivener, because Scrivener is similar to Obsidian in that it has different pages, sections, headings, you can backlink to different headings and different sections in a page, but it's not as seamless, and there isn't plugins like the page preview to see what's going on. So Obsidian certainly takes a cake when it comes to all of that sort of stuff. External links are slightly different. Because of the way external links are brought into Obsidian, you can either have that long link, which is just unpleasant to see, or you put it on a word. But to put it on a word, you need to know what the syntax is, so using the square brackets and then the open brackets to have the link. You need to know what that is, and then you need to manually actually add that in, whereas in Scrivener and Word, you can just add the link to a word. So I would put Word and Scrivener both sort of in front of Obsidian for external links specifically, because of you can just highlight and just add hotkeys and shortcuts. Comments on the page. Now, just because you're not working with someone else doesn't mean you won't be using comments. I write to myself all of the time. I give myself an idea as a comment or talk to myself as an idea for a comment. Now, in Obsidian, you can do comments, but it's essentially just text that can't be seen when you're in the preview view, which doesn't really mean it's to the side or next to or attached to. It's actually part of the text, whereas Scrivener and Word both have it aside from the text. Now, Scrivener's comments can be colored, which are very, very nice. But you can't respond or reply to a comment if you have a second thought or another thought, or you can't really resolve the comment either. It's there or it's not. That's about it. Both comments in Word and Scrivener you can use as navigation. It's slightly easier in Scrivener because Scrivener's comments are just all on one side as like a panel, whereas Word's comments go up and down with the script. So depending on how you're going to navigate through the page will impact which comments you would prefer. But as I navigate through my page, mainly using the sidebar, so if I'm in Scrivener, I was using the headings and the sections. If I'm in Word, I'm using the navigation bar. So I'm not using the comments to navigate, I'm using the comments to bring my attention to something, but both comments work very, very well, and I can't really decide between the two. It depends what you want to do. Footnotes / references, citations, tables, figures, table of contents, all that sort of stuff. I've clumped it all together because they're all very, very similar. Now, footnotes, specifically in Scrivener and in Obsidian, are similar. Obsidian's footnotes take a little bit longer to make, a little bit longer to do, but they do give you a list down the bottom. Scrivener does, when you export, compile the file elsewhere. So you do get the footnotes at the end of the document, wherever the document has been exported to afterwards, but you can see the footnotes in the page, which is very nice, unlike Obsidian, where the footnotes would be underneath wherever the line is and written potentially all the way down the bottom of the page. In Scrivener, the footnote is basically put next to with all of the comments, so you can see the footnotes and again navigate to the footnotes there and then. In Word, however, you have footnotes and endnotes and citations, and you can also link these citations to reference managers like EndNote or to Zotero, which is what I specifically use, and then that automatically can create a bibliography at the end of the document. So for academics, it just makes way more sense to use Word because it links with whatever reference manager you're using. Now, Scrivener does link sort of with reference managers. EndNote, it doesn't work with Zotero though, from what I found anyway, because the way Scrivener works with reference managers is it uses the unique ID of whatever the reference is, so when you export it, compile it to Word or whatever you're going to use, you can then reference back to whatever it was, but then you'd need to manually sort of like add those references in as you go, so it'd make more sense to me anyway to add those references in with Word. Now, when it comes to table of contents, you can generate a sort of table of contents in Scrivener through the overview, the outline view, and go up and down through it, but it's not with the page, like in the page itself for the document. It's just something there, so you'd have to generate that table of contents wherever you're exporting it to, which is Word. This is my understanding anyway. And Word, you have a table of contents that automatically updates. The same with a list of all the figures and the list of all the tables. That can be automatically generated with the labeling inside of Word. Obsidian just doesn't have any of that. So Obsidian's like way down the bottom, Scrivener's in the middle, Word's like way up the top for that one because it has full flexibility. Importing and exporting, Scrivener is actually better at sort of exporting or compiling the document into a specific format for publishing. When you look at all of the people that are publishing books, Scrivener is just great for exporting it into whatever file you need, but Word does most documents, like most people use doc documents anyway, so Word is still pretty good. So I would put Scrivener and Word very, very close at the top, depending on what you're going to export or import the documents to. And because Obsidian is Markdown, not as many people use Markdown or know what to do with Markdown. It's just a little bit less familiar, I guess I'd say. Reorganizing the sections in all three applications works exactly the same. You just go to the navigation bar, drag the heading up, and it takes all the words with it. You can do that in Obsidian, Scrivener, and in Word. Dictation. You can get Word to speak the text out to you, and you can speak to make it write whatever it is that you're saying. So you could speak to your computer if you've got a microphone like I've got over there. You can speak and then it will just type out the words. You can do that in Word, Scrivener, and in Obsidian. It's most accurate, what I have found, in Word, then Scrivener, then Obsidian. For whatever reason, Obsidian seems to mess up some of the words somehow. I don't really know why. And Scrivener also makes some mistakes here and there, whereas Word just seems to work seamlessly, for me anyway. And then reading it out, Obsidian doesn't have that function. Scrivener does, and Word does. When it comes to sharing documents, Word certainly is better at sharing it as like an overall thing when it comes to sharing it with individual people or getting different people to be able to comment on certain documents when you give them access to it. But Obsidian does have Obsidian Publish, which means you can share it online. So if it's just specifically sharing for everyone online, Obsidian wins. But if it's sharing for actual editing and working with other people, which is kind of what most long form writing is, then Word I think is better. And Scrivener, if we're not looking at online publishing, Scrivener would be in the middle because you can share the stuff, but not as well as Word, but better than Obsidian. But if it comes to publicly sharing it, at Scrivener you can't do that, where Obsidian you can. That's my thoughts on that. Spelling and grammar. It's going to depend what spelling and grammar tools help you use. I personally use Grammarly, but Word also has its own sort of like spelling and grammar checks, which, I mean, there itself just says, well, Word has its own spelling and grammar checking, Scrivener doesn't, and neither does Obsidian. Scrivener and Obsidian do have the default spelling checking. I feel like there's a default spelling checking somewhere because there's a red line under stuff because I make loads of spelling mistakes, but there's no real like grammar correction or any help. Images, I never thought I'd say this. I actually had to physically check this out because I was like, what? But Word is actually better at handling images than Obsidian and Scrivener. And the reason I say this is because even though the default setting of Word, when you put an image in, it's spurts all the words all over the place. When you change it to title or in front of or behind, which is what I do anyway, it actually works. Like, it works. You can change the setting in Word to make images work for you and with you instead of against you, which is like the default mode for some silly reason. Whereas Scrivener, when you insert an image, it's just an image blocked there. You can't really move it around much and it just sort of gets in the way. Obsidian is the same thing. So if you use lots of images with text, I would suggest using Word so you can format it a little bit better. But if you're just using images as like a screen grab, then Scrivener and Obsidian both work fine. I've mentioned a few times there are add-ins and plugins to different pieces of software. Now, Scrivener doesn't have add-ins or add-ons or plugins or anything like that, but there are lots of unique features to Scrivener, which I will go into more depth in a minute. You can't really add stuff on it, so I can't give it a good rating for add-ons, but there are unique features. Obsidian, massive community for plugins, loads of different plugins. It can be a little bit complicated in some plugins because there are settings to set up. Some of it is GitHub focused, but as long as you are fairly tech savvy, you can add in whatever plugin you want. It just takes a little bit of time to find the one that you want. And then Word is kind of the same. Word has loads of plugins, but they're not called plugins, they're called add-ins, and some of them are paid, which is not great. But most of the plugins that Word has also works with the internet, which is something that Obsidian just doesn't have. Like, for example, the Wikipedia plugin in Word allows you to search through Wikipedia, or the research plugin allows you to research and Google and find articles inside of Word, which you just can't do in Obsidian. So plugins and add-ins, I would probably say the power of the plugins goes to Word, but the variety of plugins goes to Obsidian, and then Scrivener just has some unique features. One of the more unique features in Scrivener is that you can actually find dialogue. It's kind of like a dialogue finder, so if you have speech marks in your text, you can just fade out all of the other words, so you can isolate exactly where people are speaking. Now, for academic writing, not very useful. For script writing, very useful. Focus mode or composition mode. Focus mode is what Word calls it. Composition mode, I think, is what Scrivener calls it. Essentially, you are just focused in on that document. That's all you can see. Word has a mode where you click it and there it is. Scrivener has a mode where you click it, there it is. Obsidian, you just get rid of the side panels. So all applications have the same thing. It's just a different way to get to it. Bookmarks are a term used in Word and Scrivener, and Obsidian doesn't have bookmarks per se, but you have a starred panel which essentially functions as a bookmarks panel. And what bookmarks basically do is you can bookmark a page or a section of your document. So in Word it would be a section, a letter, a word, somewhere in the document that you can bookmark and then navigate back to very quickly using Ctrl-G and then finding it. Or in Scrivener, again, you can go bookmarks, and then once you've bookmarked it, you'll get a list of all the bookmarks and then navigate to it. Why you would use those sort of navigations, to me, I don't really know, because my documents wouldn't be that long, but who knows, they may be useful. And then Obsidian, you again have that list of bookmarks, but because Obsidian, you have all of the different panels, you can just put the bookmarks on the side, which is what I do. So all three applications have a bookmark type feature, but it's how you access it that gives you the preference. For me, Obsidian first, then probably Scrivener, and then Word. I don't really know where to include this, but I feel like I should include this. In Word, you can draw over words, whereas in Obsidian and Scrivener, you can't. So if you are someone that likes to doodle over stuff just to get an idea, you can do that in Word. Scribble over and then rub it out. And if you want to put inline maths or put maths into Word, you can just draw out the symbols and it dumps it in rather than having to find the symbol, which is just a pain in the bum, especially when you're using LaTeX or latex, however you say it. Templates are going to be hard to compare because templates in Word and Scrivener are based on the template you start with. So in templates, you add a template in Word, it gives you a document or a formatting, a layout of the document that you're going to write. And Scrivener is very similar because once you've added the template or started the template, essentially it's a template of files and folders that you're going to use. And those files and folders could be the sections, the parts, and a certain layout, maybe even tags and sections in there. Whereas Obsidian templates are essentially just text expanders. That's basically what templates are. So they're not the same thing really in the applications. I prefer Obsidian's type of template because I can apply them whenever and wherever I want using hotkeys and shortcuts, whereas Word and Scrivener, I have to activate the template at the start of the project. Then again, if I'm using something like Text Expander, then I can just use the Text Expander instead of the templates I would use in Obsidian, but again, that's another tool that I would add on to the digital toolkit to work in text. Translation is another one of these things that Word does that the other two just doesn't do, and you can translate words in Word to another language, which you just can't do in Scrivener or Obsidian. Viewing changes and history. This is an interesting one because Scrivener does this slightly differently to Word. Even though Word has, you can track changes, you can look at changes in lots of different ways, there's only really one color. There's one color for the changes, so you can go through and do an edit and you can see all the different changes you've made. And that's that. Whereas Scrivener does something similar, but you have multiple different edits. So you can go through 3, 4, 5 times and see the different colors. You can see what you took out, you can see what you added in the different edits, and you can see what's changed between all of the different edits. Obsidian, no. You do have history in Obsidian, like history of the file, and the same in Scrivener and Word, you have history of the file. In Scrivener, there is quite a nice feature, snapshots, which essentially takes a picture of the file as it is, and then when you start editing and doing all your changes, you can look back at the snapshot, which is kind of like an old save, which is nice to see, which I don't think you can do in Word. I know you can't do in Obsidian, which is a nice feature, but I don't see much of a use for it personally. In addition to the drawing and the translation, there is also clipboard, which in Word is so useful. The amount of times you copy and paste stuff, you're like, I want that old copy. You can just go to the clipboard in Word. Now, yes, you can do it in the other applications, but it's not the other application doing it, it's you doing it on your own keyboard. So using the hotkeys and shortcuts on your own keyboard, that on Windows, it's one thing, on Mac, it's another thing. So that Word, you can access it, you can't on the others. Hotkeys and shortcuts is a difficult one to compare because Word has hotkeys for everything, but you can't change the hotkeys. So you have to remember all like the Control Alt F9 and all the random hotkeys that are in there. And Obsidian, you can customize them the way you want. And there are more actions in Obsidian because of the way that the layout is. So you can do, for example, my hotkey shortcut is Control Shift L to open and close the side bracket, Control Shift H to close and open and close the other side bracket. Whereas in Scrivener and Word, you'd actually have to go with the mouse and like click the different places. And Scrivener, you can change the hotkeys as well, just like in Obsidian. So Obsidian and Scrivener have the flexibility to change the hotkeys you have, but Word has more hotkeys overall because there are more things in Word. So when it comes to a quantity aspect, Word takes it, but when it comes to flexibility and ease of use, Obsidian and Scrivener both take it. I personally would prefer Obsidian, but that's because Obsidian has more features in moving and actions and dragging things around compared to Scrivener because of the way the application works. But if we're just looking at hotkeys and shortcuts, Obsidian and Scrivener both do essentially the same thing. Now, looking at Scrivener has actually solved lots of different issues that I had. Some I knew I had and I knew I needed to work through, which is the video that I posted last week, but other issues that I had and I didn't really know what to do with. So Scrivener, seeing Scrivener with the synopsis, I've actually added a synopsis section to my Obsidian notes. So I'm using Obsidian for all of my research, because doing research in Scrivener was okay, but because of the backlinks in Obsidian, it just makes more sense to do it in Obsidian, plus all of the panes. Now, when it comes to more writing and all of the different writing features, Scrivener was really, really useful, but because of the features that were in Scrivener, I was like, actually, can I do that in Word? And I could, but I didn't know I could. So actually exploring Scrivener has given me a better understanding of what I can do with Word and given me a better formatting to do my work in Obsidian. So I'm still going to use Obsidian and Word, but now my word processing is way better because I know all the features I can do in it, and Obsidian is formatted much better. So Scrivener itself, like the application, I'm not going to use, but it's certainly taught me a lot about the other two applications. If you do want to see me go through all of the features in Scrivener like I have done with Obsidian, then let me know in the comment section below.